Welcome to the Literature Live Annual Independence Lecture presented by JSW. This is the 7th year of our series and the first time we have gone digital. Many of you heard our first lecture yesterday when I spoke to Tom Friedman and Dr. Larry Brilliant. Before I speak about today's session, let me welcome Sangeeta Jindal, Chairperson of the JSW Foundation, without whose support all this would not be possible. Sangeeta, welcome, and thank you again for all that you do. Sangeeta Jindal.
You all must have heard about yesterday's lecture. It was absolutely mind-blowing. I hope some of you here today join us for this very enlightening conversation that we all will have. Today, I'm glad we are continuing the conversation with Shobhaa, Amish and Prasoon, who are great friends and who we all emulate, and who have been sharing some wonderful new thoughts with me, and I'm happy that you all get to hear them today. I believe that in these trying times, our faith and our culture is what will help us through, and I hope at this end, in this session, we all will understand a little bit of the problems that we all are facing. Over to you, Anil.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you. And thank you for always being there. This evening's discussion is about a completely different subject. And we thought it would be apt for these dark and difficult times we are all right in this. Today, the whole world is subjected to these horrors of the pandemic. Therefore, the subject we chose is how culture and spirituality can restore our faith in humanity. To talk about it, we have a very eminent panel who will also respond to your questions at the end of the session. So do keep sending your questions in right through the session. The three members of the panel who really don't need an introduction are Prasoon Joshi, renowned poet, lyricist, and communication professional; Amish, best-selling author of the Shiva trilogy, the Ramchandra series, and now director of the Nehru Center in London; and last but not least, Shobhaa, celebrated author and outspoken columnist, who will chair the session. Over to you, Shobhaa.
Namaste and Jai Hind. It's Independence Day and a very important day for India and for our panelists and all those who have tuned in, welcome. Now, it's an honor and a privilege for me to be moderating a session with two such incredible minds. Two incredible minds who are powerful communicators and have strong positions and views on spirituality and culture. So I would like to invite both of them to start off by making an opening remark, which can take a minute or 2 minutes, because we're all very eager to know where you stand, how you stand in today's India on both these subjects, which can be provocative or they can be soothing. And what we need right now in these very troubled times is a message of hope for humanity. So over to you, Prasoon, if you'd like to start first.
Thank you, Shobhaa. Thank you, first of all, for introduction. And also, what is pleasant is after a long time we are together. And so that's quite a telling thing, because whether it's Anil who took the initiative or, JSW, but the fact is that we are here to discuss something which we haven't discussed before. So that tells you how important this subject is. But if you look at it, why is that this topic about culture, art, and spirituality has become such an important subject at these times? There's definitely something which has happened. So what is that has happened? I think we have seen, we have introspected, we have almost inquired what is essential, what is important to us, and which probably we had forgotten about. And the fact is that these are important things, otherwise, we wouldn't have bothered about them. What had happened to us is that I think our lives had almost gone on autopilot. It's like we were living life in a blur without bothering. Like just do it had become the mantra. Bas kar do, karna hai, and a sense of dynamism, sense of movement, whether it was meaningful, whether it was false. I mean, we were taking many flights which we are not taking today, and life is moving on without those flights. A lot of my colleagues tell me that probably a lot of things we were doing are not essential. So there is something which has happened, which has made us introspect, and in that, what has emerged is spirituality, art, culture, music, and almost as if they were there but we had forgotten to look at them. We were ordering birthday flowers, but we had forgotten to smell the flowers. We were ordering flowers. And that's where somewhere, we were ordering music. I remember corporate shows are happening, and people are actually there for networking. I'm very happy that today, whoever is logged in for this one is there not for networking, but to listen to us, because there was definitely an overlap there, and somewhere these very very important things were somewhere lost. I would call this era as an era of rebirth of nuance. एक ठहराव आया है, जहां पर हम ठहर के जिंदगी की उन चीजों को देख रहे हैं जो चीजें हमारे लिए शायद बहुत महत्वपूर्ण थी पर कहीं खो गई थी.
That's such a lovely way of putting it. And that word terao has so much depth and is open to so much interpretation. It's not just about a pause, it's much more than that. So, Amish, would you like to take over from that and say your opening remarks, make those?
I think, what Prasoon has said is just so thoughtful. The value of taking a pause, of taking a moment and just breathing and evaluating life. But I would like to add to that and say, if we step back and look at not just a moment, but look at the last few decades or indeed the last century, in many ways, humanity has never had it better as compared to the modern times. There's this wonderful book I read called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. And if you see the lifestyle that humanity is living today, the middle classes today lead lifestyles that the royalty couldn't have lived 150 years ago. Per capita violence is among the lowest that humanity has ever faced. Relatively small men, as I am, and women have actually never been safer physically, right? The fact that a relatively small man like me can go through his entire life without being beaten close to death is actually pretty rare if you look at from a historical perspective. From opportunities, from material comforts, in every way humanity has never had it better, and yet by most measurements humanity has never been unhappier, which is very bizarre, right? That because we were always told that if you get the material comforts, then Maslow's hierarchy kicks in and you should become happier. We got all the material comforts, capitalism delivered that for us, but we weren't happy, right? Is it that we were searching for happiness outside through purchases, through materialism, through brands, when the actual cause for the lack of happiness or peace is perhaps a better word. Happiness can at times be a little not deep, shallow, but okay, let's look at peace. Is the cause of us not finding peace more internal than external? And will continuing to buy material things, material comforts, it's like you're trying to fill a hole. There's a bucket, there's a hole, and it's not filling up with water, and you just keep pouring more water when actually the water is just flowing out of the hole, and the problem is internal, how to fill that hole. and spirituality can be that answer. Is that worth exploring? I'm not suggesting a swing to the other extreme, that we stop all materialism and go live in the jungles. No, I'm not suggesting that. But I'm suggesting that can we have a sense of moderation? Life is not just about things that you buy. It's also what you feel inside, and a lot of it is internal as well. The journey, and if you can find some answers for that, maybe you can find peace, which the next brand that you purchase will not be able to give you.
Thanks so much, Amish. I want to, since you've used the word brand, it's a very important word. Now, brand India used to be spiritual India, was a very powerful message that the country has always sent out to the world. And Prasoon, you're a master of brands. They say you can sell anything from a can of Coke to spirituality. If we were to rebrand India and actually attempt to sell our spiritual message more aggressively to the world, which desperately needs to feel a sense of comfort through spirituality, how would you propose to do it? And if you can sing a song about it, nothing like it. I'm just teasing you, but I'm sure you have a poem and a song based on these two very important emotional aspects of our life in India.
Shobha, when we talk about sharing our Indian belief system with the West, I think we'll have to also look at the way it's consumed. See, we are very felt. We believe in Anubhut Satya, the felt first-hand truth. We believe in and we are about felt reality. Even if you look at the quantum physics, it reaches to that the ultimate after the atom, and Amish would talk about a lot about it, and the fact that you reach the ultimate even beyond the atom, electrons, and further and down, and you reach the same place as the super consciousness or consciousness is. You talk about that. You reach in India, you realize those things through a very different process. So our processing is very different. For example, if I talk to you about our relationship with nature. A relationship with nature. I grew up in the mountains in Uttarakhand, and I never understood for a long time. I didn't understand this competing with nature. One-upmanship with nature, like you're saying, this adventure sport, or winning over nature, trying to outshine nature. कैसे जल्दी मैं beat कर दूं, कैसे पहाड़ पर चढ़ जाऊं. On the other hand, when I used to be as a young boy in the mountains, I used to respect nature. मैं नदी में पैर डाल के बैठना पसंद करता था. I used to bow down to nature. So we are taught, our relationship with nature is very different. The pandemic has made you realize a lot of things. One of them is our relationship with nature. So if you want to actually share what India believes in, first of all, the mindset will have to change. It can't be a transactional mindset. For example, art. If you look at the Bharat Natya Shastra and you see about Rasa Utpatti, the birth of Rasa, it's not important that a linear story has to reach somewhere. The moment is very important. The very suspended moment. The karuna, agar uska ras hai, to uska ras use mujhe mil jaye, that is important. It's not important that the story is reaching somewhere or trying to say something. So what happens is, when the art is also transactional, that what did I get out of it? Then it's a very different reality. Also, I think Western world understands art born out of tension very well. And I have a lot of time for that. A lot of art is born out of tension. But a lot of art is born out of compassion. A lot of art is born out of shanti and complete. जैसे कि एक तीर है, एक धनुष है, a bow and arrow is important to also relax and pull it back. Our art, if you're only just is born out of chaos and tension, then it's a very different kind of art. So I think it's important that we understand the Indian ethos, The way we, unless we do that, we will not be able to share what our belief system is. Our belief system is in rhythm, is not in competition with nature. So I had written this poem, which is, sorry. It says, what have we learned out of this pandemic? Is suno, कुछ देर ठहर कर सुनो. सुनो, कुछ देर ठहर कर सुनो. कुछ कहना चाह रही है हवा. कुछ सन्नाटे भी बोल रहे. कुछ सत्य गगन से उतरे हैं जो बंद द्वार हैं खोल रहे. बुनो एक जीवन फिर से बुनो. सुनो, कुछ देर ठहर कर सुनो. अपनी गहराई में कूदो, सच्चे सिक्के मिल जाएंगे. अपनी गहराई में कूदो, सच्चे सिक्के मिल जाएंगे. अपनी लहरों से बात करो, सब उत्तर भी मिल जाएंगे. अपनी गहराई में कूदो, सच्चे सिक्के मिल जाएंगे. अपनी लहरों से बात करो, सब उत्तर भी मिल जाएंगे. चुनो, खुद अपना रास्ता चुनो. सुनो, कुछ देर ठहर कर सुनो. थी कब से मौन सृष्टि सारी. थी कब से मौन सृष्टि सारी. मिट्टी की गंध को कहने दो. अब मुक्त करो तुम स्वर सारे. हर रुके छंद को बहने दो. सुनो, कुछ देर ठहर कर सुनो. कुछ कहना चाह रही है हवा. कुछ सन्नाटे भी बोल रहे. कुछ सत्य गगन से उतरे हैं जो बंद द्वार हैं खोल रहे. सुनो, कुछ देर ठहर कर सुनो.
Wow. Wow. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure everybody listening in will be deeply moved. You used the words Indian ethos, and I wanted to ask Amish, since he is in a very, very responsible job as the director of the Nehru Center, he will be focusing, I'm sure, on cultural, spiritual aspects of whatever the Indian ethos as we know it and have always known represents. How do you propose to communicate that? Do you have any plans? Amish, I know it's difficult having events right now during the pandemic, but the virtual events that you're planning, what are you centering those around in these times to kind of reassure people that culture can never die, no matter what the virus and the pandemic going on outside, but there are certain things which are permanent and eternal, and culture is certainly one of them.
No, and I will get to that. I just want to add something to what Prasoon said, and it's so beautiful the way he put it. When he spoke of how our ancestors spoke of atoms and Anu, Parmanu, it's there in the Bhagavad Puran. And the interesting thing was that our ancestors at the lowest level, at the smallest level, said that matter and time become the same. Parmanu and Anu, Prasoon, you might know this, can be used for time also, can be used for matter also. And there was this sense that, when he said so beautifully, ki lehron se baat karo, which is so different from the Western approach, ki lehron ka seena cheer ke aage niklo, which is the Western approach. You are the hero fighting nature. Whereas the Indian approach is to show nature is not a resource to be exploited, it's a goddess to be worshipped. Right? The entire approach is different. It's not that Indians did not climb mountains, but the tradition in the Indian way would be that you touch the feet of the mountain before climbing. That please bless so that I can. It's with just the attitude is different. Like if you see Ravan's character in the Ramayana and what is the key lesson that we learn about that we learn from Ravan in the Ramayana? The problem of an ego. Ravan had that same attitude that you find in this, lehron ko cheer ke aage badho. That was Ravan's attitude. And our Indian tradition said, no, that's not the right attitude. You must have achieved things, but you must go with a sense of partnership rather than I will, conquer this and go ahead. It was a different attitude. Coming back to your thing, I agree that, there is a challenge in organizing events now. Physical events can't be done, right? And we are certainly not an essential activity, sadly. So the UK government might subsidize, arts and culture, but they haven't allowed, rightly so, haven't allowed theatres, auditoriums, etc., to be open, because these can be massive vectors for the spread of the disease. But I have an Indian attitude that every dark cloud has a silver lining. So we have moved all our events online, and trust me, it's been a blessing in disguise, right? We have a lovely building right here in Mayfair, the Nehru Center. It's a lovely Georgian era. I don't know if the two of you ever been here. When the travel gods allow it, please do come. A
I
standing
have.
invitation. Yeah.
Thank you.
So
I've had a book launch there. It was wonderful.
awesome. We have to do another one. Now,
We
you've
must.
seen the auditorium. There is a capacity, right? 100, 120, 130, you can't fit in more than that. We started doing events online, broadcasting it on Facebook and ways. We are getting, audiences in the thousands now. We are
Yeah.
having events which are with 12,000, 15,000, 20,000 viewers, and we are not just a London brand now. We are getting participation from the Midlands, from Scotland, from Wales, from Northern Ireland. So we are a national brand, right? So if an artist comes to the Nehru Center, we can offer him a national audience, not just a London audience. Interactivity has shot up dramatically. The kind of events we can do as well. So the healing power of music. It's one of the things that we Indians have always believed in. So we've run this series called Heal the World, with musical performances from the traditional Indian arts, but with a nice modern zing to it, and it has done really well. We did an event yesterday as a lead up into our 74th year of independence, where we had Grammy Award winner and Padma Bhushan Pandit Vishwamohan Bhattji and Padma Shri Malini Avasthi ji, and they came and they performed, on our virtual stage. It was a rocking hit, So I see that it is an opportunity. There is a silver lining. The fact that the three of us are where we haven't taken the trouble of traveling, and we are having an event right here, with the support of JSW and Lit Live, with Sangeeta and Aldharkar kind of driving the show, shows the opportunities, right, of online, and people can join in from across the world. There always is a silver lining. If you're an optimist, you'll see it.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because there is so much uh, resistance sometimes to, for example, all the new platforms, which can also generate a great amount of toxic material online. Now, how does one counter that in Prasoon? In your experience, there is negativity, and how do you counter that force? Because it's something of great concern to everybody in the world, particularly people who are putting their opinions out there and want the world at this point to be healing. It's a good word that Amish used. We want a world which is more at peace, to be able to overcome what we're all stuck in, a terrible time, a medical emergency like no other the world has ever known. How do you deal with social media and its negative, toxic side? What does one do?
See, I feel, see, we are living in times where you've got democratization of platforms. You never seen, whatever, our platforms are very, very curated. We knew the voices very well, but today it didn't mean that those voices did not exist. Today, what you call fringe, suddenly you think is a fringe voice coming from somewhere. Then nothing is fringe. For some people, we were connected and we are living in this, air-conditioned rooms. We could be fringe. So the question is that yes, there is a platform which जिसे कहते हैं मंच जो है सबके पास है. Now everybody has a voice, and certain voices are the voices we've never heard before. Sometimes people say that where does this language come from? It is not born overnight. It's just that you did not have a platform to express yourself, and now that you have, you finding people are finding it completely alien. It's not alien. It's been part of this society. So you have to learn to deal with everything. Also, uh, I think what this pandemic has done, it has almost, as we call Advait in spiritualism in India, the non-dualism. Uh, you have almost realized that you are one, because this pandemic is not a problem which is of a certain section, certain class. It is a problem which has united people suddenly. It has made you realize that you are all part of this human race, and you have to find a collective solution, a code of conduct which is relevant to everyone. So I think it's almost like you have woken up from a sleep. एक जागृत सी अवस्था है ये, and it's same for everyone, and that's what spirituality always taught us. It's just that we confused spirituality so much with religion, because see, religion is only one way of accessing spirituality. It is not the way, and India has always understood that. I could be a poet and I could be feeling spiritual. You could be a painter, and you could be accessing your spirituality through your painting. You could be. I was writing the film Bhag Milkha Bhag, and I was talking to Milkha Singh ji on that. And at times, what he used to tell me is that he used to become one with running, as if there is no difference between him and the Dor, and
That's all.
just oneness. This moment of oneness is what spirituality is. So I think we knew this country. If you ask me what India can give the world, India can tell the world how wide we are when we talk about spirituality. How much of diversity we have in terms of being spiritual. You had Charvaks here who were completely जिसे कहते हैं, non-believers in God,
Yeah.
atheists, and they were also called rishis. Rishi Charvak, we refer to him as. So it was another way of actually accessing spirituality through your own belief system. आप जो भी चीज मुब्तला होके करते हैं, जो भी चीज आप डूब के करते हैं, वननेस के साथ करते हैं, उसमें आपको स्पिरिचुअलिटी मिल जाती है. And that is the message India can give to the world. And I think increasingly, if we talk this language, the negativity which you're talking about, I have chosen to be positive. Amish has chosen to be positive. We have chosen to join hands with various efforts which probably government is making, various organizations are making, and rather than constantly criticizing, see in Solomon Island how they kill a tree. When they want to kill a tree, they abuse the tree. They collectively abuse the tree so much कि वो पेड़ धीरे धीरे सूखता है और उसके बाद गिर के मर जाता है. Sometimes I feel when we talk about India and we keep badgering it, कि ये नहीं है, ये नहीं है. बहुत जरूरी है कि आप criticize करें. But criticism is constructive if it's interested in my growth. If it is interested in my destruction, it is not criticism. So I think we need to know that we should not make this world, we should not make our country Solomon Island's tree. We have to somehow, we somehow learn to now, whatever little, it's a difficult country, let's face it. We are living in a difficult country. We have a wounded past. I think we need to now put our minds and hearts together to see what next we can do. And I tell you, in the pandemic, we've seen the way we are handling, the way we are facing it. India has a lot to give to the world, a lot to give to the world. It's just that we do not have the tools to reach out. First, we have to solve our problems, and then we have to take our thoughts to the world. I think we have a lot to offer.
Well, thanks, Prasoon. That was a really passionate, a wonderful and passionate presentation of your beliefs and your core systems through which you operate. I want to ask Amish, as a follow-up, Prasoon called it a difficult country, which it undoubtedly is. It's also a huge country with so many different aspects of culture. There's not one composite culture that you can say, this is Indian culture. There are cultures within cultures within cultures. In your books, you have attempted to use mythology to interpret maybe one stream of culture that you know. But is there anything like cultural superiority of one kind of thinking over another? Can it be appropriated? Can culture be owned by any one group, even particularly in a country as large and disparate as India?
Often, it's certainly true, in foreign countries, but I find it often it's true in the way Indians look at India as well. Often we don't get our scale as a country. We have more people in India than all of North America, all of Europe, all of Middle East combined. We have more languages than all these regions combined. We have more cuisines than all these regions combined. We are more of a continent than a country. The second thing that makes us unique is we are the only pre-Bronze Age pagan culture that is still alive. Every single other pre-Bronze Age culture was killed, was massacred out of extinction, into extinction over the last 1,000 to 2,000 years. There was a wave. There was a historical wave over the last 2,000 years. Pharaonic Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greco-Roman culture, Central America, all of them were wiped out, and they were largely two groups, Europeans and Turks, who essentially massacred all these cultures out of existence for various what were considered crimes like idol worshipping, crimes like goddess worshipping, crimes like nature worshipping. India has never had an attitude that this is the one truth and everyone better follow this truth or you will burn in hell for eternity and God will ensure that you burn in hell for eternity. Why will God do that? Right? We've never had that attitude. We've been victims of invaders who have had that attitude, which is what these three things is what makes our society extremely complex. Our scale, our massive scale, our continental scale, the fact that we are the only pagan, pre-Bronze Age pagan culture that is still alive. China is not a pre-Bronze. China is a pagan culture, I admit, but it's not a pre-Bronze Age culture, right? It's at max 2,500 or maybe 3,000 years old. Pre-Bronze Age means at least 5,000 years old. So our roots go back very old, very deep, right? And third, we have suffered horrific invasions in the last 1,000 years. Considering these three factors, the relative stability of our country is actually fantastic, right? The fact that we have managed to move on from a lot of what we have suffered, that we are relatively stable, that we are relatively united right now, and most Indians tend towards the center. There are a few extremists, I admit, in all communities. I'm not denying that. But most Indians tend towards the center. India is the only place where you can say where it's not just about tolerating someone else's religion. We actively respect someone else's religion. I'm a Hindu. I'm a very proud Hindu. But every time I go to Jaipur, I will always visit Ajmer Sharif, and I will pray there. Right? The Venkateshwara temple, which is in the south, you'll find Muslims coming and praying there. Right? You Google, you can find images of Muslim women in burqas praying at Venkateshwara temple. Manganyar Muslims from Rajasthan, who are Muslims by faith, have their vocation is to sing devotional ballads of the Ramayana. This in a country which has suffered far more in the last 1,000 years than what the blacks suffered in South Africa, and we suffered it for 1,000 years. So I am not saying we are perfect. There are many things we need to improve. But most of the common Indians, my faith in India comes from the attitude of the common Indians, who are on average towards the center, on average relatively chilled out, on average relatively liberal. And by liberal, I don't mean being leftist. By liberal means the ability to respect a different truth. Right? You have your God, I have my God, I have my goddess. Goddesses aren't bad. Right? You notice in English, for example, the male god is written with a capital G. You notice that the female goddess is written with a small g. Why is that? It's because English emerged in a culture where the male god has to be given respect, the female goddess has to be given disrespect. It's a culture. A language shows the culture. Vedic Sanskrit has no differentiation between the male god and the female goddess. The words used for both of them are the same. That reflects the culture of our ancestors and where we emerged from. It is the common people of India which give me tremendous confidence about our future.
I want to ask you a follow-up question, Amish, because early when you started your career, you mentioned that you found a lack of respect for Hindu culture and that the publishing industry in India did not wish to support it, and you had to self-publish your first book. So could you just share that sentiment with us, that you felt there was publishers lacked respect for Hindu culture? Because it's one of your statements.
There is, and perhaps it's a holdover of maybe many centuries of culture that has been imported. You'll find so many, including Hindus, believing that idol worshipping is somehow wrong, right? Yeah, I'm a proud Hindu, but I'm not an idol worshipper, which I find a little bizarre. Why? What's wrong with idol worshipping? What's wrong with Murti Puja? Some say, no, because that's not worshipping, gods. Who told you? God came and told you. But have you noticed that throughout history, you will find many evidences of idol rejecting cultures going around massacring people simply because they worshipped idols. You find this across the world. How many case studies can you find of idol worshipping cultures going around massacring idol rejecting cultures simply because they did not worship idols? You notice the reverse didn't happen. Why not? Think about it. These are just things to think about, right? And many of these attitudes are so ingrained. Like, for example, I I'm a Hindu, I'm a proud polytheist, so therefore I genuinely believe that a goddess deserves as much respect as the female goddess deserves as much respect as a male god. I believe that, right? And in my language, in Hindi, in Sanskrit, there is no differentiation between a god and a goddess. But in English, like I told you, there is. I had self-published my first book, and initially I used to be told that grammar rules are that the male god has to be written with a capital G, female goddess has to be written with a small g. I used to write it with a capital G. It used to be changed. As I became more successful and I just started insisting on my way, my publisher was kind enough to agree that fine, look, we will write goddess also with a capital G. Because I said, why should I disrespect the goddess? I'm a Hindu, right? There was an excerpt from my previous book, from Ravan, which was to be released, and this was Ravan released what year and a half back, and we sent an excerpt. I won't tell you, I don't like controversy, so I'll not tell you which site, but an excerpt was released, and they changed. It was my excerpt, so it was goddess with a capital G. They changed it to a small g. Okay. Without checking with me or my publisher, they just released it. I saw it. I was livid. I said, you're disrespecting the goddess. How can you do that? The editor who did that was also a Hindu. So I told my publisher that insists that I'm a Hindu. Goddess will be given respect. It will be written with a capital G. Of course, they received a long lecture on English grammar rules. And then we pointed out that that same website is very happy to change grammar rules if a white-skinned transgender insists on their pronouns. Right? For that, they're very happy to change grammar rules when they say they, them. Does that follow any grammar rule? No. But they were very happy to change their grammar rules. Why? Because a Westerner white-skinned guy said it. But if a polytheist Hindu says, boss, I don't care about your grammar rules, you will respect the goddess, they refuse to change it. We withdrew the excerpt because they refused to change it. I don't mean to sound this thing, but we didn't need that excerpt to sell the book. And this in a state where, when Ravan released, again, I'm not trying to sound proud, I'd already sold some 4.5, 5 million copies by that time. Can you imagine what authors who do not have that sales backing or the publisher backing them, what they have to go through? And this shows a bias. And this is what I spoke of. This bias has to be, and I am requesting those who are in the elite to reflect on their bias against those who worship goddesses, those who do murti puja, those who do nature puja, those who are atheists in the ancient Indian sense, not the modern Western sense. Modern Western atheists tend to be very aggressive. They feel a need to insult religious people. Prasoon said so. Sorry, this has become a slightly longish answer, but he spoke of the Charvaks. There are many other atheists, the Mimamsas, the Sankhyas, Art, Bodha, Jaina. They are also atheist schools. In the Indian way, it wasn't considered bad to be atheists, but our atheists were also just like our religious people, chilled out. They didn't feel a need to insult religious people to prove themselves to be good atheists, right? My
Thank
only
you.
request to the elite, reflect on their own biases. That's all.
Prasoon, this is an interesting topic. It's getting really exciting now. Now, he's talked about the elite and their biases. The elite have a bias, Amish insists on saying. I would agree or not agree, but that I'm not here to agree or not agree with either of you, but to present some questions which will lead the audiences to think for themselves. So I'm asking you, Prasoon, that when we're discussing culture and spirituality, particularly today, does it only refer to Hindu culture and a Hindu interpretation of spirituality in the Indian context? And is it, again, an intellectual elite that insists that that be so in a country of India's size and with all our different religious groups? Is that fair? Isn't it kind of a majoritarianism to say and equate culture and spirituality only in the context of Hindu gods, goddesses, and Hindu mythology?
See, I feel in the modern India we live today, we have not at all understood Hindu religion to begin with. I think that there is when we say Hindu, it's a Hindu goddesses. I mean, there is a Hindu religion which exists without god and goddesses. You know, where
Okay.
the nothingness is worshipped. Now, when we talk about Hindu, we actually very in a very broad sense, and in a rather in a very unfair way, we without getting into the nuance of a very ancient civilization, with a very Western parameter, as we would use a quote like, religion is the opium of the masses, or left versus right. Where has this left and right come from? I mean, I don't think many people who use this terminology, left
Exactly.
and right, actually first know where it's born from. Is it born out of the way this country is structured? What is the meaning of dharma and religion in this country? Is it referring to god and goddesses, or is it referring to the ethics of life? We have never ever tried to deep dive before we trashed it. And that is the reason I have a serious problem without understanding branding something, and saying that let's throw it out of the window because it represents XYZ. This is a very huge amount of bias. If you say this is bias for or bias against, I talk to you about, I'm born in the same country, and I'm telling you, if you read the Upanishads here in this country, as much as I have written some of the biggest Sufi songs in this country. You know, my songs with A.R. Rahman, you've heard them. How have I written? One of my songs I have written, एक खुशबू आती थी, मैं भटकता जाता था. एक खुशबू आती थी, मैं भटकता जाता था. रेशमी सी माया थी और मैं तकता जाता था. जब तेरी गली आया, सच तभी नजर आया, मुझ में ही वो खुशबू थी जिससे तूने मिलवाया. Now, where is it coming from? If you see, there's an ancient proverb here. Kasturi kundali base. Oh, again, Kasturi kundali base. मृग ढूंढे बन माही. ऐसे घटघट राम है दुनिया देखे नहीं. Or again, that Aham Brahmasmi. On one hand, it is coming in the Sufi song. On another hand, it is coming out as a metaphor of the musk deer, which is looking for the fragrance all his life, the fragrance which is coming out of his own body. This country is very intricate. So before we say that this is majoritarianism, or a particular sect, or a particular religion, I think we need to understand the intricate fiber of this country's thinking. You know, a lot of people said that poetry, the religious poetry should not be poetry. I don't agree with that. I mean, you look at, if you take the religion out of India, there wouldn't be any, philosopher left in this country. Because every philosopher, chintak jise aap kehte hain, is born out of some religious thinking, which you And when you call religious, you become so narrow that you are ready to throw Meera out. You're ready to throw Surdas out. Now, when Surdas is writing about that, the mother is telling Krishna that drink milk, and he's saying, "Maiya kabahu badhegi choti? मेरी चोटी कब बढ़ेगी? कीती बार मोहे दूध पिवत भाई अजहू है चोटी." तू बार बार कहती है कि दूध पी ले तेरी चोटी बढ़ेगी, लेकिन होता तो है नहीं. So I'm not going to drink milk. How is it different than what a mother is doing today? A Bonvita ad is doing the same thing today, and trying to make children drink milk. The fact is that there are human emotions which are hidden and in our culture. And if the form is religion, let's not throw baby with the bathwater. Let's not be biased against religion and say that this is. And also, when you say, "Oh, this is this religion or that religion," without understanding the where it emanates from, without understanding the intricate fiber of this country, we are making statements which are absolutely absurd, which disturbs me. And when you talk about the masses of this country, I saw this documentary where this vegetable vendor, a lady who is
Yes.
selling vegetables, she's explaining the philosophy of life. She's saying, "Ye deh to pinjar hai," and she's selling a vegetable also. She's ill. And see, a common person in this country talks religious philosophy. Now you want to throw it out and you say, "This is gods and goddesses, this is this and that," without understanding where it emanates from, without understanding the intricate fiber of this country. That would be huge injustice to the great culture of this country, which in common man, if you see, he's not biased. They are very open. As Amish just told you about Ajmer Sharif Dargah, and you see people there, the devotion, जो भक्ति में सर झुकता है, उसको पता नहीं होता कि वो झुक रहा है कि सजदे कर रहा है. वो तो समर्पण जानता है. और उस समर्पण पे अगर आप शक करते हैं तो आपकी नियत में खोट है, समर्पण में खोट नहीं.
I just want to ask a follow-up question, which you can choose not to answer, since you said in a country like ours, intricate, delicate, complex, it's very
Yep.
important to understand what Hinduism is all about, to understand where it emanates from, is what you just said. Isn't it equally important to understand, for example, where Islam comes from in the same context? Shouldn't that be treated with the same amount of respect?
We do. I'm telling you that I have written the biggest Sufi songs in this country. Where is it coming from? I am born in a Hindu family. Okay. And do you think anything stops me from doing that? That is where you have to understand we are very open. Can you narrate what is that shloka, Amish, which says, Ekoham Sat?
Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. It comes from the Rig Veda. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Truth is one, but the wise speak it as many. And if I can add, there are so many examples among the common Indians on this, like Ustad Bismillah Khan. I'd received an award once, named the Ustad Bismillah Khan Award for promotion of Indian culture. He comes from the state my father comes from. You should have seen, he's a Muslim by faith. Before every performance, he would do the Saraswati Vandana, the prayer to Goddess Saraswati. We just spoke of Ajmer Sharif or Haji Ali. Outside of a Friday, you'll find more Hindus out there than Muslims. Among the common people, only an Indian Muslim could have written something as beautiful as या तो मस्जिद में शराब पीने दे साकी या ऐसी जगह बता जहाँ खुदा ना हो. Only an Indian Muslim could have written this. The common Indian understands this very intuitively and very deeply. The problem is often the perspective, because it has come from the West, Middle East, and you wanna, that you have to follow one religion and you have to deny another religion. And because religion is seen from that lens, no, that's not the Indian way. I'm saying that's a Western way. And because often the elite sees religion from that perspective, they think the only way they can have peace is by denying religion. Most Indians don't see it that way. Most Indians see it almost intuitively that of course I will worship my God, but I'll worship another god as well, or another goddess as well, and Mother Nature as well. Because what's the problem, right? It's the Indian way where we see divine in everything, including in the trees, the rivers, the universe. We see divine in everything. This is the old pagan way, and
So I think
I submitted
I
Indian
believe,
Muslims. Sorry.
people on this panel, we don't differentiate. We don't see that to follow one religion you have to say trash another or say I don't believe or you are wrong. It is not the way this country is. What I'm saying, when we understand the ethos of this country, we have to see this is a beautiful culture which has allowed so many subcultures. नदियां हैं, नदियों से निकली हुई नदियां हैं, उसके बगल में बहती हुई नदी है. It's a beautiful example for the world to follow. And
Exactly.
where people are, yes, because you where you can maintain your identity while respecting other identity. We are taught that way, and if we go that way, there is a huge future for the world, for coexistence, not
So,
denial. This country is not in denial.
so
Yeah.
multiplicity of cultures and religion and respect for all of them would be a core message that I'm sure we won't disagree on. And to switch it to something lighter, and you wear a different hat, Prasoon, when you're the chairperson of the Film Certification Board. And the changing dynamics of film censorship, how do you see it in the post-pandemic world or even during the COVID thing? Is there going to be, in popular culture, a whole different language that's going to come out of this crisis? Are we going to see movies which are addressing different issues in a totally different and radical way? Because what the pandemic has done is make us think out of the box. Do you see that happening? So Amish,
I
I
think he
believe,
has.
yes,
Okay. Yeah, his connections were
Prasoon has,
lost. Yeah.
yeah, Prasoon has left, so I can adapt the question, and you may be able to answer it a little more. That is the post-pandemic world going to respond differently in terms of movies, books, paintings, the whatever popular culture represents? Will it be influenced by the circumstances which at the moment seem so dark and hopeless, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel? Will we see a burst of creativity that spells out optimism for humanity? Is that something you can foresee?
Very interesting question, and in fact, we'd had a discussion on this precise topic.
Okay.
Just a few weeks
Let
ago in
him.
India Global Week. Prasoon, Shekhar Kapoor, Paul Brett, who is also an Oscar-winning producer based here in London, the four of us had discussed this. I see the world. There are two possibilities. Which path the world will take, it's still too early to say. Right? There was a pandemic much worse than this in the in the 1910s, from 1917 to 1919, called the Spanish flu. Nearly 50 million people are said to have died from it, and apparently the death toll in India was close to 15 million. The British Raj was not very efficient, so the death toll was so high, and of course coupled with the First World War, the amount of people who lost their lives in the 1910s. There are sociologists who say that this gave rise to the Roaring Twenties in the US, right? Because the reaction was, we're going to die in any case. The hell with it, enjoy life, right? So it was almost a doubling down of hedonism, drugs, free sex, right? Uh, that could be one route, because often, immense pain and the nearness of death, sometimes people just want to look. I have just a few years left, just enjoy life. That's one path. The other path could be, maybe there could be a rediscovery of spirituality, of some measure of traditions. Now, I'm not saying go so traditional that you lose the gains that have come from liberalism over the last few decades in women's rights, in LGBT rights. But can you find a means that can give you the benefits of traditions and liberalism, that can give you the benefits of spirituality? These are the two routes that could be taken. One is doubling down on hedonism. The other is rediscovering spirituality and tradition. I don't know which path the West will take. At this point in time, it feels like there's a hankering for spirituality. There are many people who are kind of taking a step back and thinking that one gets a sense, seeing articles in the media, etc., that we need to kind of take a step back from everything that we've done till now. If the West does go down that route of spirituality and rediscovery of traditions without losing the gains of liberalism, I think India has a role to play. Because Indian spirituality is not an either or. It's not that you have to hate another religion to love one religion. It's not that you have to deny the goddess or other gods to love your god. That's not the Indian approach, right? So you can be spiritual and yet get along with other cultures. That's something that India can teach. In India, you can be traditional and liberal at the same time because our ancient traditions are actually deeply liberal. The respect for women's rights in our ancient way, right? Respect for LGBT rights, it's part of our ancient tradition. Our ancient scriptures say the gods abandon the land where women are not respected. Chandravanshi is the most powerful line of rulers India has ever had. Lord Krishna was a Chandravanshi, was founded by a transgender called Leela, and she founded the dynasty when she was a woman. She became a man later, but she founded the dynasty when she was a woman, right? So we've had respect for transgenders, for women in our ancient ways, so we can marry traditions and liberalism. I think India may have an answer if the West decides to take this route. If they decide to take the route of hedonism, I don't know if India has an answer.
Thanks, Amish. We're going to be getting Anil Tharkar back on the panel, and Prasoon
Yeah,
has left. He may or may not be
here
able to
I am.
rejoin, but welcome, Anil. The question was about popular culture and how it's being impacted by the pandemic. Do you see a surge in post-pandemic kind of new language in cinema or in books or in poetry or in painting? And you've been also with the movie industry for a long time yourself, in your own capacity at that point, films division. Uh, you've seen the various phases that Indian movies have gone through. How do you see them from this moment on, when the industry is really dealing with a crisis like never before? They either sink or swim or adapt. What do you see happening? Is it going to be the age of
Uh,
mythologicals, for example?
yeah. Shobhaa, it was the National Film Development Corporation that I was involved in. Uh, well, one thing that's going to happen for sure is that in these months that we've all been locked down, the whole world has been locked down, all the writers have been writing furiously, including Shobhaa Day, who's come out with books, the pandemic diaries. So I'm sure Amish has been writing. Prasoon told me this morning that he's written more songs in these 4 months than he has in a whole year earlier. So that's one aspect. Suddenly, all writers, poets, and so on, and that goes for people who write scripts for films, suddenly they have the time undisturbed. They're at home, they're working. So there's going to be certainly a lot of productivity. Now, is that going to center on the pandemic, or is that going to be divorced from the pandemic? That is something we have to see. A catastrophe of the kind that we are going through has to reflect in what we write. And I think we are going to see a lot of very, very dark, uh, uh, not necessarily things written about the pandemic. But I'll give you an example. When Shakespeare was writing, the bubonic plague had affected the whole of Britain, and people were dying like flies because there was no medicine at that time. So Shakespeare wrote in 1 year, he wrote Macbeth, Othello, Antony and Cleopatra, three great tragedies. Now, he didn't mention the plague at all, except I think somewhere he says a plague on both your houses, which is in Romeo and Juliet. And a few phrases there. But what he wrote was dark. It was brutal. And he didn't write a single comedy. He wrote a lot of comedy in his life, but not during those times. And I think that could well happen, that what we now produce as literature, what we produce as movies, what we produce as music might be very dark, somber, apocalyptic. Yeah.
Amish, I wanted to check with Amish because his last book has an 11th century hero taking on the Turks. Now, what kind of research goes into a book of that kind? And what is the
Um,
message at the end of the book? Most of your books end on a high note of victory over daunting circumstances and the complete defeat of evil forces.
no, in fact, the Shiva trilogy, has a kind of some said a depressing ending, and even the Ramchandra series will end not on a happy note. The thing of there being a sense of conclusion, at the end of a story, comes more from Aristotle's Poetics, which then came to Persian storytelling, which is reflected in modern Indian stories. It wasn't a part of the ancient Indian way. Often the stories would not have a sense of conclusion, but King Suhail Dev's stories certainly did, because this is actually based on actual events that happened, but it's historical fiction. I'm not a scholar. My job is not to study primary sources. It's the job of scholars to study primary sources and write secondary sources. Scholarly books or textbooks, which then storytellers like me can study and then write a story based upon. For me, King Suhaildev, as a story is inspiring for a few reasons, and that's what I try to put across. That one, the value of unity, right? It's particularly relevant in today's times as well. Why are we the only pre-Bronze Age pagan civilization that is alive till today, when every other pre-Bronze Age culture has been wiped out? Their temples destroyed, their universities burned to the ground, nothing survives. Right? But we are still here. Large part of it is at times we had leaders who could somehow unite us. That usually was our biggest problem. We never had a lack of bravery or resources. Our problem was usually internal divisions. Others didn't have to defeat us, we defeated ourselves with our own divisions. And that to me is the key message of King Suhaildev. He was a Hindu from a subaltern caste, a Shiv Bhakt, but from a subaltern caste. And he brought together Hindus of all castes, of Indian Muslims, of Indian Buddhists, brought them together and fought among the most brutal foreign invading armies the world had ever seen. The Turks are not originally from Turkey, they're originally from Central Asia, right? And they didn't just attack India, they attacked the Arab world. The Arab world was also destroyed by the Turks only. What was Europe, which was originally Greece, was attacked, conquered by the Turks. The Greek males were all massacred, the Greek females were taken over. They were the foot soldiers of the Mongol attacks on China, right? So they were the military superpower of the world from the 11th to the 16th, 17th century. And yet, for 160 years after the Ghaznavid invasions, Mahmud Ghazni's invasions, they didn't come back to India. At a time when they were going around the rest of the world, right? They didn't come back to India because of King Suhaildev. It's an inspiring story of unity, right? Uh, and I am trying to address something which I think our establishment historians made a mistake on. If they don't call the British colonial rule the Christian rule, why do they call the Turkic colonial rule the Islamic rule? Are they trying to say that they were Indian Muslims ruling us? No, they were not. They were foreigners. They were not Indian Muslims, right? Razia Sultan did not look like Hema Malini. Alauddin Khilji did not look like Ranveer Singh, right? To us, they would have looked Chinese. They were from Central Asia. They had Mongoloid features. They did not speak Urdu. Indians spoke Urdu. They spoke Turkic or Persian, right? We wouldn't have understood most of what they were saying. And this has added poison in India. The fact that we don't realize that they were foreigners. They were not Indians, right? We have to understand that. And those are some of the thoughts I'm trying to get across through King Suhaildev's story. We need to be united. Indians across all religions, all castes, if we are united, we are freaking unbeatable. As we were when King Suhaildev fought the Ghaznavid Turks.
I love the way you put that. It sounded great. May I welcome back Prasoon Joshi, who had taken a short break, is back with us. So thanks, Anil, for stepping in. Thanks very much. Hi, Prasoon. I wanted to ask you a question about the spiritual and the religious kind of. There is a dichotomy where people don't always get it. I'm confused myself. How does one distinguish between a spiritual person and a religious person? I think it's a very common kind of confusion where people don't know the distinction. Can you define it a little?
See, I earlier, Shobha, when we were earlier talking about, and tried to say the same thing. Is uh, religion has spirituality at its heart, at its core. But that does not mean that religion is the only way to attain spirituality. First of all, that is what my understanding, and this understanding comes from being born in this land. See, again and again, I'm saying that we are brought up very differently in terms of religion. When we understand religion, our definition of religion is very different. There is a certain devotion we are brought up with, where there is no contradiction that with any other religion. So first of all, religion for us is spirituality, a way to reach spirituality. It's a pathway towards the spirituality in its purest form. And it becomes very condescending when we start trashing religion, because there are many people who might not have the luxury of that so-called spirituality, which is a very sophisticated way of the elite to access spirituality. For the common people, going to a temple or going to a mosque or going to the place of worship is their way towards spirituality. And a housewife, if she starts practicing yoga and start meditation in her home in a small town, I mean, she would not know how to sort of explain it. But going to a satsang and sitting there and listening to bhakti is another way of reaching. So we had many ways of reaching or attaining spirituality in this country. And I think we have been condescending in trying to trash religion and saying that religion is the opium of the masses and it does not do anything. It does a lot. The model we created for ourselves, where this that success will replace religion, or many other things, material comforts will replace religion. I think these things probably came without understanding that 99% of the people are not so-called successful people. How do they feel great about themselves? How do they feel good about themselves? Religion was spirituality was a way of making them feel worth it. And when they go and feel devotional towards their deity, or whichever way they worship, they feel devotional, there is no need to trash that. So I think religion is a way to a spirituality, but it is not the only way to spirituality. And
Thanks, Prasoon.
yeah.
No, I just wanted to, for my own clarity. So, would you say that spirituality is necessarily an individual's inner journey, seeking something beyond what is obvious in the world outside, the material world? And religion is, in that sense, more a community centric practice of belief, a more group activity, more organized activity. Would I be completely off, or is it correct?
Religion will have culture in it. Religion is a kind of a tool to spirituality. I feel religion is a very potent tool to spirituality. But spirituality can be attained without religion as well, in my opinion. And if we understand the distinction, we will never confuse spirituality and religion. Religion can have cultural cues, and they are all very beautiful. They are, without culture, without identity or nothing. So if there are tools which are enabling, rather than, finding, finer ways of doing it or amending them, we are trying to trash them. and that hurts the mass sentiment. It's like a kind of disapproval which comes from the elite, which says, this is not what we approve of. This is not something which is illiterate, which is uninformed. But the fact is, this is the only way they know. And rather than understanding what they get out of it, so by that logic, we are saying anybody who goes to the temple and bows down to his god or her god is actually not attaining spirituality, or it's the only way to attain spirituality is the way we think the way spirituality can be attained. No, अलग अलग पथ बतलाते सब, पर मैं ये बतलाता हूं, राह पकड़ तू एक चला चल, पा जाएगा मधुशाला. वो रास्ता कोई भी हो सकता है आपका, लेकिन सब रास्ते एक ही जगह पहुंचते हैं. ऑनेस्टी होनी चाहिए, ईमानदारी होनी चाहिए उस रास्ते में. अगर आपकी ईमानदारी नहीं, देयर इज नो ऑनेस्टी इन द वे यू प्रैक्टिस इट, then, and if it is muddled up, if it's corrupted in the way it's practiced, then there is a problem. I don't think there is any problem with religion per se. It's the way religion is interpreted. That's where the care is to be taken.
Thanks very much, Prasoon. And one final question to Amish, and then we'll be opening it up and taking questions from people who have joined us. Amish, would you say that the idea of kutumb, family in India, which is very, very strong, has seen us deal with the pandemic emotionally, psychologically, perhaps even physically, better than in some of our neighboring countries and elsewhere in the world? Family has really come into its own during this crisis because we have discovered we need each other. Interdependency is what survival is all about.
I certainly agree. One of the I think one of the places where liberalism is perhaps losing the argument in the West. I am a liberal. I think it is a much better way to run the world. But any form of thought must also be aware of its excesses. And the excesses of liberal individualism has destroyed families and traditions. There's an epidemic of loneliness in the West. I'm in the UK right now. There was actually a minister for loneliness till some time back. It had actually gotten that bad. People have passed away alone because there's no one to take care of them. There are no relationships with neighbors. And when I was saying that there's perhaps a realization in the West that individualism has been taken too far, and there is a value to families and traditional structures as well. This is where I was coming from. So if traditions are too hidebound, then there's no space for individual expression and liberalism. But if you push individualism to such an extent that there is no backup for you, there's no family, there's no support structures, and you're all alone in a time of crisis. And a time of crisis cannot just be a pandemic. People can go through difficult personal times, right? And your family is the one who will help you through those difficult times. So there's a value to finding balance. One of the most wonderful lines that comes down from our scriptures is Ati Sarvatra Varjayit, that extremes or extremism of any kind should be avoided. Divinity is in balance. Find the value in liberalism and individualism as well, but find the value in family and traditions as well. If you can find that balance, life becomes much easier. Ups and downs are a part of life, man. Who can escape grief? As Gautam Buddha had said, the first of his four noble truths, that grief is the fundamental reality of the universe. Everyone suffers grief, either because of external situations like the pandemic or individual, the journey of your life. This is a part of the universe. You have to learn how to handle it. And what gets you through it is the support of your family and close friends.
Thanks very much, Amish. We can end this on a happy note. Prasoon, do you have a happy song or a happy poem? And we have lots of questions coming in. If you don't, I'll go straight into the questions.
No, happy song is, I will hum. I think Anil wanted me to hum something. In these times, I will say, there's a song I'd written called Khul ke muskura le tu, dard ko sharmane de. खुल के मुस्कुरा ले तू, दर्द को शर्माने दे. खुल के मुस्कुरा ले तू, दर्द को शर्माने दे. बूंदों को धरती पर साज एक बजाने दे. हवाएं कह रही है आजा झूले जरा, गगन के गाल को चल जाके छूले जरा. खुल के मुस्कुरा ले तू, दर्द को शर्माने दे.
Thank you so much. Absolutely brilliant. Both of you, absolutely fantastic. Please stay on for the questions. And let's have the questions. It's from Dr. Mukesh Batra. Is culture and spirituality interdependent? Can one exist within the other? I think we have answered that quite comprehensively. If he's been watching this, can we take another question, please? Can we have the next question, unless someone wants to answer that all over again? This is from Akash.
Just to add, Shobhaa, that culture is what? Culture is an intricate tool. I mean, the way you practice spirituality becomes the culture. You know, spirituality is a journey inwards, and where you start feeling one with everyone. There is no difference you feel. See, what has happened, I earlier told you about this non-dualism which has happened in the COVID times, where you had an inward journey and you started feeling one with everyone because everybody's problem is the same. So spirituality also teaches you to connect with everyone. The true spirituality is what connects you with not only other human beings, but everything which exists in this world or in this universe. Every हर प्राणी से आपको कनेक्ट करे, every living or non-living form से connect करे. That is true spirituality. And I think that comes also part and parcel of a culture which thinks like that. Not every culture thinks like that. It's our culture which thinks like that. That's why it becomes part of the culture. But
I have
it's
a
also
follow-up question.
what you define as a culture. Wearing a ghagra or doing dandiya, if you define that as culture, but that's a different part of culture. But if you say connecting with everyone and feeling one with everyone is part of my culture, then that is very much part and parcel of spirituality.
But even dandiya essentially comes from spiritual roots, because what does garba mean? It means the goddess's womb. And the dandiya ras is celebrating essentially the goddess, right? So in the Indian way, because religion is not defined as that if you follow this religion you have to hate another religion. It never causes a problem in infusing that into culture too. And you'll find that most Indian art forms are centered around the divine. Literature, sculpting, painting, all of them. I mean, dancing, they're usually centered around the divine.
Yeah, so I'm saying culture is form. What is form and what is the thought? I'm saying thought also is part of the culture. And if you narrowly define it just by appearance, how it appears, probably that's the form. Yeah.
I have a short follow-up question to that, because I read somewhere about what you said about artificial intelligence and the one world concept that we may be heading towards. Do you want to just say that very briefly? What you meant by that? Artificial intelligence can kind of take over our thinking.
Yeah, what I said is that artificial intelligence, today, what is the difference between artificial intelligence and human intelligence? The fact that when Amish is talking or you are talking or I am talking, what is my frame of reference? Where am I accessing information from? My own experience, my memory, that's my world. But what does artificial intelligence do? It accesses everybody's information. So the database is everyone. So if I want to get an answer to a question, I know what my answer is. Artificial intelligence knows my answer, Amish's answer, Shobha's answer, and everybody's answer, because it's out there on the cloud to access.
Scary,
So that
scary.
one, yes, that's oneness. So that means that it is. So what does Advait say? What does spirituality say? Finally, you are part of one, consciousness, and artificial intelligence is accessing that one consciousness, which is everybody's consciousness combined. It's a collective consciousness which is artificial intelligence is accessing, versus an individual which is only privy to my own world, my own information. So that way, artificial intelligence is almost doing what spirituality does. When you plug yourself into the infinite source and the larger consciousness, you're part of that larger consciousness, and you are accessing the energy, which we say that you've tuned yourself into the larger source, and which artificial intelligence is doing exactly the same thing. It's tuning into the larger, sort of consciousness.
Thanks so much, and I'm glad I asked that question. Can we have another question, please? From Akash Jadhav, the ancient scriptures had a scientific approach and much more clarity in terms of thought. The question here is, where do we see the transition when our traditional knowledge became religious concepts? If
Amish.
Amish would like to tackle that. When did our traditional knowledge become religious concepts? I guess that's what he's asking.
Yeah, look, if I'm understanding the question correctly, um, he says that our understanding is not as deep of our ancient past as our ancestors had. On that, I would agree. We have studied very little of our ancestral knowledge. Many Indians actually believe that our ancestors didn't write too much because the British Raj told us that, which is actually bullshit. Our ancestors wrote a hell of a lot. The National Mission on Manuscript has tabulated some 3 million handwritten Sanskrit manuscripts that survive till today. This despite the burning of so many of our universities, the Nalanda University, Takshashila University, Vikramshila, Ujjain, Tirupati, all over the last 1,000 years. And not all of these are religious or spiritual texts. Many of them are scientific texts. And the ancient way, religion and spirituality weren't in conflict. And 3 million handwritten manuscripts, by the way, I should tell you, ancient manuscripts is more than the rest of the ancient world combined. So our ancestors actually wrote quite a lot. The fault wasn't with our ancestors, the fault is with us, that the idiotic modern Indians have not translated or even studied the wealth of knowledge from our ancestors. And spiritual, thought-provoking, scientific texts become religious, or quote unquote the modern approach of religion, which is, it's a limitations of the English language that we see religion that way. It becomes that way when we stop questioning. Like I'd said earlier, language gives you an idea of the culture that the language emerged from. Like the fact that English privileges the male god over the female goddess in its grammar rules. Similarly, unlike Vedic Sanskrit, which doesn't do that. Vedic Sanskrit doesn't have the concept of blasphemy. It doesn't have a word for the English, a translation for the English word blasphemy. Since the concept wasn't there, they didn't have a word for it because nothing was beyond questioning. So we lose our ability to deeply understand those texts when we stop questioning. In the ancient Indian way, there was no one and nothing beyond questioning, including the divine, the gods or the goddesses. It's the concept of blasphemy has come with the invaders. It's not a part of the ancient Indian way. So we need to relearn that concept and then study our texts once again with the of respectful questioning. There's nothing wrong with questioning in the Indian way. No one is beyond question, not even the gods. If you remember the example from the Mahabharata, when Gandhari Ma curses Lord Krishna at the end of the Mahabharata, not the television serial, the text itself. Right? She curses Lord Krishna, who's God, and questions many of his actions. And Lord Krishna doesn't say that he is God and how can he be questioned. In fact, Lord Krishna respectfully submits to the questioning of Ma Gandhari, who is just a human being, right? And in fact accepts her curse as well, because the law of cause and effect, the law of karma dharma, applies to everyone, including the gods. That is the traditional Indian way. If we can imbibe that approach of questioning everything and everyone, then we will actually be able to understand the texts that our ancestors have left for us. Because then we'll have the attitude that our ancestors had.
Amish, can I interject and ask you whether we can also question authority
Yeah,
in,
that
in
is the
today's
traditional
India?
Indian way. But I will say once again, one of the beauties of in the Natya Shastra, it's been said beautifully. Satyam Bruvat Priyam Bruvat Na Bruvat Satyam Apriyam. That speak the truth, but speak it with love, speak it with manners. Often I find, and one of the things that sadly again we have imported from outside India, this need to speak rudely. Okay, and we think that those who speak rudely are cooler, and they are showing their greater intellectual vigor. When in fact those who speak rudely are not showing their talent or their intellectual vigor, they are actually showing the quality of their upbringing. And you'll find that you are able to get your point across a lot more and get someone else to listen if you just speak with manners, speak politely. That was the ancient Indian way. There's this wonderful book called Vada, okay, written by Radha Vallabh Tripathi, no relation of mine. I encourage everyone out here to read the book right after you've read Suhail Dev, of course. I'll plug my book, of course, shamelessly. But read Vada as well.
Yes.
It's for, in that Radha Vallabh Tripathi ji speaks of the ancient Indian traditions of debate, of knowledge systems, and truth speaking, but the value of speaking politely. Again, in the Natya Shastra, there's a wonderful line which says that words that come out of the mouth often have more power and more ability to injure than arrows from a bow, right? So you have to be very thoughtful of what you speak. Speak the truth, challenge others, but with politeness, manners, love. You'll be surprised how much you'll be able to get across. I speak in all circles. Yeah, I try my best to speak in with manners, and I think people who disagree, at least I think, they at least listen to me with an open mind, even if they don't agree with me.
And I hope some TVs in India are listening to this conversation and will take this from what you just said about speaking politely. Question from Nikita Moge. Do you think concepts in spirituality can be simplified and conveyed through popular cultural mediums such as memes or comics? Prasoon, do you want to take that?
So I didn't get the question. Basically, you're saying that popular culture
Through
can get
memes and
inspired.
comics, do you think concepts of spirituality can be simplified and conveyed through popular
Yes,
cultural mediums such as memes and comics, which is the way today's
absolutely.
young people, I guess, yeah.
I remember reading this series of comic books, kind of a pocketbook comic sort of interpretation of various, like Derrida's, Lacan's, and Levi-Strauss. I remember there was a series of these comic books which I read, and they were very helpful, in my introduction to Western philosophy. So I think definitely those can help. We all remember Amar Chitra Kathas, how much those were important in our growing up years. Many of the children of my generation are brought up in those Amar Chitra Kathas, and they came to know about a lot of these stories of our ancient India and many other, sort of fables and folklores through those books. So definitely, it's a great suggestion, and I think a lot of people are working on it, but more work is required in terms of simplification. And comic books are a great way of simplifying complex subjects.
Thanks so much, Prasoon. The next question, please, from Shankar Pratap Singh. Do you feel that now people across the world, post COVID-19, might have understood the humanity once again in a better way than before? The concept of humanity. I guess is the question. Have they understood what it means to be part of the great human race better
Yes,
now?
as I
Yeah,
told you that COVID does not discriminate. So
yeah,
it is a collective human problem. I think, and Amish was talking about individualism earlier, that our societies had become so individualistic that pursuing me, myself had become very important. Suddenly, you realize that there is a problem which is not discriminating between the me or someone else out there on the different countries or different geographical locations or different socio-economic stratas. I think yes, it has united humanity in a very strange way. I hope you know we survive this and we survive it in more positive way.
thanks, Prasoon. The next question, I'm not sure how much time we have left. This is from Sean Fernandez. Do you think that culture, like religion, suffers from too much administrative involvement? Could it be better served with a government administration serving simply as a source of funding and less involved in organizing culture? That is definitely for you, Amish, as someone who's heading Nehru Center.
Uh, Yeah. Look, it's like this. I think India does it a lot less than in the West. In the West, the government is far more involved in culture. Uh, and perhaps it was required in India up to a certain level, because we were a very poor country. We didn't have the funds to encourage culture. There are sadly very few artists who can make money through their art. That is the nature of the area. Many have to have jobs on the side to pay their bills, and government support certainly makes a big difference. um, Now, as India becomes richer, and many private organizations come in to support culture, perhaps the government footprint will come down. The government can still contribute to some extent, but the footprint will come down. JSW, for example, the Jindal Foundation is doing wonderful work in this, and as India grows richer, you'll find more and more private foundations adding to this flow. Yeah, that's it. My answer's over. We can move to the next question.
जो
Thank you.
बिकता है
Let's go to the
जो
next
बिकता है
question. Okay, wonderful.
तो जो बिकता है
Yes,
वो टिकता है. एक तरफ आप ये बोलते हैं जो बिकता है वो टिकता है. So
that's
अगर
correct.
if everything is market driven, and
Yes,
what would happen to the murmur cultures? They are murmur cultures. Okay, they
yes.
need
True.
support. बांसुरी की आवाज आपको ढोल के शोर में नहीं सुनाई देगी. When what would you do with the flute?
Nice.
And
Very
to
nice.
make the flute survive, you would
Yeah.
require some
Someone has
sort
to.
of silence. Yeah. So I
Correct.
think government role should be there, because otherwise only the dominant cultures will survive and the bansuris will die.
True.
Very well put indeed. We have one
But
final question.
it'll end up
It's
being
the
a
last question.
combination of various factors, the government and the private sector. And in India, you find the private sector actually adding so much now, like the Jindal Foundation.
That's why, Amish, I said it looks like the future is wonderful on the whole, with support coming in from people like the Jindals and others who are contributing to nurturing artists, poets, painters, movies. And we look forward to more such support in future. And here's the last question. It's from Jinx Akerkar. Why does one have to worship a tangible object? God stroke goddesses are within us, no matter what the religion. Why not a direct dialogue, direct with the deity without middleman stroke middle woman?
Very good question, Jinx. So if I may answer this, Prasoon. Very good question, Jinx. And I will Jinx, right? Jinx Sarkar. And I would support your right to do that, right? But what I would oppose is if you said if anyone is worshipping a pratima, they should be killed. Then I would oppose you, right? Because there are some cultures which did have that attitude. The Indian attitude was you have the right to your own truth. Like I said, among the main Indian schools of philosophy, depending on how you count it, there are 12 or 13. Many of the schools of philosophy, some of which are classified under Hinduism, like the Sankhyas, Mimamsas, Charvaks, were atheists, right? Bodha, Jaina, which is the Buddhist Jain schools, most of the philosophies in them don't believe in a creator God, so which means technically they are atheists. The Ajivikas were atheists. So nearly half of the dharmic religions, the schools of philosophy in the dharmic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, were actually atheist, right? And no one attacked them. No one said that you're doing something wrong. There were some among them who wanted to worship only the formless divine, no priest in the middle. That was cool as well. But they did not attack or want to kill or convert those who chose to actually follow a guru or worship a pratima or an idol. That is the moderation I would put on your suggestion. You have every right to follow your method of worship, but you have no right to kill or convert or judge others who choose to follow a different route. That's their choice. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, but the wise speak it as many. That is the moderation of the Indian route. You have no right to judge someone else who follows a different route. That's all.
Thanks very much, Amish, and thanks very much, Prasoon. And Jai Hind again. I'm going to invite Anil back to wrap this up. It's been absolutely brilliant, and both of you were extraordinary. I've learned so much, as I'm sure all those who have joined have. So thanks again. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Shobhaa. You did an incredible job. It's a very, very complex subject. And of course, you had great panelists in Prasoon and Amish who gave very thoughtful and insightful replies to all your questions. We've had a long session, but it wasn't long enough because there were so many questions coming in. So I'm very sorry to our listeners and our viewers whose questions couldn't be answered. But maybe soon we'll have another session and we'll go deeper into this subject. So thank you, Shobhaa. Thank you, Amish. Thank you, Prasoon. Thank you, Sangeeta, the JSW team, the Lit Live team, and most of all, thank all of you for being with us today. Bye-bye. Good night.